Shalom. We are at segment 13, numerical equivalent in Hebrew of Echad. God is one. Echad in Hebrew is the numerical equivalent of 13. Anyways, we're beginning a new book, the book of Exodus, in Hebrew known as Chumash Shemot. And this section is called Shemot, where this section speaks about the enslavement of the Jewish people in Egypt. The next segment is going to talk about the plagues, but here really is what it's all about. And we see where our ancestors have gone from one extreme to another extreme. Shalom and welcome to Life Lessons. Today's segment 13, the numerical equivalent of Echad in Hebrew. Echad is 1, 8, and 4, that this is 13. And this is a special one because it's a new book. It's the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, and it's Parshat Shemot, where it talks about the slavery, the enslavement of our ancestors, the Jewish people in Egypt. And we see where they go from one extreme to another extreme. First of all, they came to Egypt, and everything is well and wonderful. Joseph, he is the viceroy. What could be even more than that? One of their own has made it. He's on top. He's the viceroy. And everyone just gives them all the respect they want. They have their own suburb in Goshen. And here we have it in the beginning of our section where Joseph passes on. The brothers also pass on. And then the verse tells us there's a new king that doesn't know Joseph. What does it mean he doesn't know Joseph? So some of our sages tell us he made himself believe like he doesn't know Joseph. So when everything was so wonderful with Joseph, Joseph saved the country from starvation. And here, just like this, after Joseph passed away, they don't want to even remember all the good things that he did. And not only this, they turn against his people. So Pharaoh sits with his people, with his advisors, and says, we need a plan. We need a plan about these people here, about these Jewish people. And this is where they came up with the idea of enslaving them. And then we read later on about the male children should be killed. All kinds of things that who would believe that people could come up with it, what we have seen not long ago by the Nazis, and in this world, in our times, what we see crazy things that go on in some parts of the world. You go back and you see the roots of it all the way in the beginning here, in the times of the enslavement in Egypt, with all the suffering that they had to go through. So this is the situation that they find themselves. So they find themselves, here they came down with Jacob, the whole family. There were about 70 people as they entered Egypt. And now the slavery had begun. And at this point, nobody knows what exactly is going to be here. Pharaoh has a plan. His plan is, let's kill all the male children, so they won't have kids there. And slowly, we're going to get rid of this so-called nation of the Israelites or the Hebrews. One of the children that survived this decree is the little kid by the name Moses, where, interesting enough, by who is he saved? By the daughter of Pharaoh. A whole story that you could look it up in the Torah, how she went to the river, she saw a baby crying in a box, she saved him. And then Moses grew up, and then he went out, and there's a story how he was saving some of the people from brutality. Anyways, the story with Moses is in our section here. He had to run away. He had to run away because Pharaoh was after him. And here he ran away. He ran away to Midian, as it says over here. And he married the daughter of Jethro, the daughter of Yitro. And here we have a regular day where Moshe is busy taking care of the sheep, of the flock of his father-in-law. This is what the verse tells us. His brothers and sisters at this time in Egypt are going through a very hard time. He had to run away, so he maybe does not feel all the suffering. So the verse says, so Moses was pasturing the flocks of Yitro, his father-in-law. Doesn't expect anything to change. It's a regular day like yesterday, what he did the day before. And he came closer to a mountain known as the Mount of Chorev, but later on this will be Mount Sinai, where God will give the Torah and the Ten Commandments. But at this point, it's just his regular day, as I said. So the verse continues and says, and all of a sudden, he sees a burning bush. But as he's looking very closely to this burning bush, what does he see? He does not consume. The fire does not consume. So right away, this alarmed Moshe. This is strange. This is very different what normally should happen. When there's such a strong fire, it should eat everything up. And here it was not consuming, so it was right away giving him a message that something is not the norm here. Okay? So Moses says to himself, let me go over and see this vision in front of my eyes. Why is the bush not burning? Continues the Torah and tells us, and God saw that he came closer, so he called out to him, and he says, Moses, Moses, Moshe, Moshe. And he says, here I am. And here comes a very interesting statement. He tells him, don't come close. Don't come close. Take off your shoes. So two things he's telling him. Don't come, as he's approaching to look and to gaze on this phenomena, what's happening in front of his eyes. So first thing, the message from God to him is, don't get close. Don't get close. Then he tells him, and number two, take off your shoes. You need to stand barefoot, touching the ground. Why? Because the place that you are standing on it is a holy place. To quote from the verse, Admat Kodesh, because the place which you're standing is holy soil. It's not just a holy place, but the ground, the soil is holy. And then God starts to tell him what he wants. He says, I am the God of your father, of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I've seen the suffering of your brothers and sisters. I've heard their scream. And I've decided the time had come to redeem them, to save them. I've seen it all. I saw the pressure. I saw what they're doing. So therefore, Moshe, I am going to ask you to become my messenger, and then you should be the one to go. And there was a whole discussion. Moshe first resisted, says, who am I to do this? Until finally he gave in to God's demand that he should be the messenger. But what's very strange here, we had revelations to Adam, to Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The first 12 segments of the book of Genesis spoke about many different encounters of God with these early, our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Anytime there was a discussion, anything, we don't have such a thing that the first thing, there was a whole scene, how God introduced himself. God came to Abraham and says, go, leave your country to where I'm going to show you. God speaks to Isaac. God speaks to Jacob. Here all of a sudden, it's a whole hupalaz, I would say, a whole scenery here as an introduction to Moshe. It's like first there's a fire and a bush burning. Moshe is looking to see what's going on, and then he hears a voice. But what is this message? What is this message that it is not consuming? That it is not consuming. There has to be that this is something important to the whole message of Moses and to the whole mission, what Moshe is going to be doing. The other thing is that he doesn't right away start telling Moshe what's the mission. First he kind of tells him, well, don't come near. Don't get close. And then take off your shoes. I mean, what a way to start a conversation here. It must be here something much deeper about the story over here. So we have to understand something important here. Moses' mission is going to be to take the Jews out from Egypt. But why to take them out of Egypt? Why can't they have freedom in the country that they live? Here in the United States, we have seen difficulties with different sections in our country where there was slavery, for example, and there was freedom. But the idea was not that they should leave this country in a way that will be counterproductive. In other words, you didn't succeed, and then they living the country. So with all the turbulence that we have in adjusting and all that, but the idea is that we should all be one big colorful society and all belonging in the same place. Here in Egypt is very clear when slavery got nullified, what the idea was to come out of Egypt. Okay, so we have to know a little bit of the background because that's not where they belong. They came from Israel and they need to go back to Israel. However, there's something special here. In other words, the idea is not just freedom. A lot of times we were freed from Egypt, but that's not what it was. This was the beginning step to be free from Egypt. And in this section itself, God tells Moshe, he says to him like this, this is the sign that I have sent you, that you are my messenger. What is the sign? Because you should remember, when you will take out the people from Egypt, this is the mountain with where you will serve me. This mountain where now the burning bush is going to be a very important factor in the development of the Jewish nation. That's where the revelation of God on Mount Sinai. And actually, there's three things that happened here. There was an Exodus, there was a revelation on Mount Sinai, and then an entry in the Holy Land. This is all one important long journey that has a few stops. So you're going to get the laws, the commandments, the instructions, but the idea is to get to the promised land, to the Holy Land. So Moses' job is not just to be the military leader to here come and take them out of this terrible country that they're being oppressed, but he's a messenger of God also to spiritually help the people to be elevated from their problems. They had sunk in Egypt, and some of them had become like the Egyptians, and they needed special guidance through Moses as they come out of Egypt. So when they meet on Mount Sinai, they should all be ready to receive the goodness from God himself. But for that, had to be this whole preparation of coming out of Egypt. So, if we think a little bit for a minute about what's going on over here. The goal is for each one of us, because this is a message, a universal message to all of us, we should be able to transform ourselves from whatever Egypt that we find ourselves. In other words, the Egypt that we find ourselves does not have to be physically the country of Egypt, but represents the boundaries and the limitations that we have. The same as our ancestors. They were stuck in a situation. And they needed to come out. The idea of connecting themselves to God and receiving the commandments from God is to help them to cement this relationship that it should be forever. But who are we dealing with? We're dealing with us human beings. And because we're dealing with us human beings, and as we see in our day-by-day life, we can get excited about certain things, but how long does that excitement go on? And the fact is, we get up in the morning, we might be excited about something, and here we do our prayers in synagogue in the morning, so the excitement is still there. But then as the day goes on, and other problems come in, and all of a sudden, the whole excitement that I had as I was getting up in the morning has cooled down, or even went away, or it was replaced with challenges and difficulties. So let's say we made it through the day, and we survived all the challenges. That does not guarantee that tomorrow is going to be a wonderful day, because I don't know. I may tomorrow morning have the same thing again. I'll get up, I'll be very excited, and then I will have a challenge. What does it mean in a deeper sense? In a deeper sense, it demands from us that the inside of us should be a fire that burns all the time. The fire that represents our relationship with God needs constantly to burn inside us. When it is not burning so strong, or God forbid, low, or even turned off, that allows for other things to come in. There's a fact that we all know that says when the mind of a person is constantly thinking, because that's what the job of the mind is. The mind thinks. Now, you have an option. The option is that we could feed our mind what to think. But if we don't feed our mind what to think, so we shouldn't assume, so therefore the mind is going to sleep and not going to think. Then the mind is going to start thinking about anything else out there that there is. So if you're walking in the streets and you are not concentrating of anything specific, let's say, so your mind starts wandering, sees this thing, sees that things, and you start wondering, and all of a sudden temptations come in and other kinds of things, because you are not controlling. You are not in charge of yourself. But when you have a constant urge and a fire that is burning inside you, then it's hard to see how a person could go wrong. Because when you're connected, you're on fire. But we're human beings again. See, God did not create us as angels. He created us as human beings. So we do have temptations. We do have challenges that we need to work with. To come and say that we are all perfectly righteous, in a nice way to say, so we're very naive. But it does not take away from the fact that we do have the tools Each of us, every human being, has the tools to do the right thing. Here is exactly what's happening here in our portion here. Moshe is being introduced to a very important mission, foundational, the Exodus. And the Exodus does not mean just the physical Exodus that happened in Egypt so many years ago, thousands of years ago, but we're talking about even a spiritual Exodus that we constantly need to come out from. And the only way to serve God is by being excited, by having a fire, as some would say, a fire in our belly. But the question sometimes that bothers us is that I could get excited, and at that moment I think I have it, and I'm there, and then just a few hours later, it's all gone. In other words, the fire is burning, but it is not consuming. So when Moshe sees the burning bush, and the fire is burning, is not consuming, it hit him. All of a sudden, that woke him up. He started to look at it. He says, what is this telling me? Because all of a sudden, he saw this idea in front of his eyes that here it is, there is this thing that it is burning but not consuming. And this is the message that God was telling him as the beginning of his mission. So he turns to him and he says, don't come close by. And I'll soon explain it. Number 2, take off your shoes, because the soil that is under your feet is holy. The idea is that we need to turn our space into a holy place. We shouldn't get lost. Has the fire consumed everything or not? Because why? Because it is possible that it will never consume. Very few people could say they have reached that level that the fire had consumed completely, that they are constantly on fire. That is what we call a perfect individual. In the words of the Torah, tzaddik, a righteous person. Many, many times you hear about guidance, books that people have written, all guides how to be a perfect person. But really, what this is trying to tell us, maybe that's the goal to get there, but there's a reality there. A reality is that we're never going to be perfect. So for some people, that can sound very depressing. What do you mean I'm not going to be perfect? It's an illusion that sometimes we have that I need to be perfect. It's not going to work that way. So what is it? What is it? So day after day, a person works on himself to where? To get to a situation where he should be what is demanded from him or she. I want to introduce an interesting story for Rabbi Zusha of Hanapali. Rabbi Zusha of Hanapali used to say, he was a great sage, used to say, after 120 years, when my time comes in the world to come, they're not going to ask me, why weren't you Moses? Why weren't you Abraham? You're going to ask a very simple question. Why weren't you Zusha? Why weren't you who you're supposed to be? This is the story here with Moshe. Moshe is coming and he sees that the burning bush is, that it is a fire burning but is not consuming. The message from God to everyone is, don't think that the fire will always consume. There's going to be many times we get excited, but that excitement doesn't last, and there's always ups and downs. What's important is the ground that is under your feet. That's why he tells them, remove your shoes. What you need to concentrate, the environment that's around you, the ground, the earth, the soil that's under our legs, that's what's that touching, that there should be no separation there. That's what we need to concentrate. We need to concentrate in influencing just what's around us. To worry about the bigger picture, that it should consume completely, that the fire should consume completely. That's not our job. That's the job of great righteous people. That's their worries. But for each one of us as an individual, this is what we have to know. So this is the story here. Before Moshe is going out here to be the messenger to all the Jewish people, this is what God is teaching him. You're going to be a teacher to everyone, but each one on their level. The idea is that they should remember there is a fire and they be able to work with that fire, even though it does not consume all the way. The main thing is, remember the makom, the place. What we need to, that it should penetrate, that the place under us should become holy. And with that, Moshe takes that message and finally agrees to be the messenger. And this has become not just a message for what happened in Egypt, but a message for all generations to come. And even in our times, this will help us as we work on ourselves to be even better and better every day, and ultimately with the coming of Mashiach.